Hello, my lovely viewers. Are you ready to find out what happens next? Let's do it then. Chapter 3 Insecurities. Bright light warmed up the girl's peaceful figure as she slowly shifted on the soft, comfortable mattress before opening her eyes, blinking few times. She breathed so softly, covering her face as the sunlight coming from the small window bothered her. But then she sat up quickly and looked around her, observing her surroundings. She was sitting on a small wooden bed, her body covered in warm, clean blankets. She was in an unknown bright room, slightly bigger than the one she had gotten used to sleeping and waking up in. Right across the room, there was a small wooden cabinet, and the dirty white robe was neatly folded on top of it. Blinking in confusion, Ian looked down at her body, only to realize that her arms and legs were covered in bandages, and that her skin was no longer covered in dust or dirt. Instead of wearing the ripped, worn-out dress, she wore the black, plain one, which reached her knees. Rubbing her eyes, the young girl decided to get up and see where she was. She shivered as her warm bare feet met the cold floor, only making her aware of the fact that she, indeed, was not in the familiar area. As she looked around, she remembered that she was in the Pharaoh's palace. She remembered that she was bought by the Pharaoh himself last night, and then she was taken care of by the older woman who Ian supposed was named Anai, if her memory served her well at this moment. She approached the door and reached for a knob before walking out of the room. She took small, slow, and careful steps, her feet getting used to the freezing ground beneath her skin. She allowed herself to look around, slightly curious, as she observed the rich hallway she was in. To her, it seemed like she was in a completely different world, maybe even the paradise. Ian, I see you, wake up. Ian heard the soft voice behind her, and her body stiffened before she lowered her head, allowing her blue orbs to meet the floor and her bruised feet. She slowly turned around, not daring to look up at the older woman. Come here, let's get you some clothes and food, and you should wash your face too. You're not familiar with this place yet, are you? Anai said, no anger or displeasure present in her warm, feminine tone. Ian only nodded before following Anai through the long hallway decorated with gold. The young female was silent, not daring to let a word escape her lips. But the silence between two women was broken by Anai's voice once again. You must be confused, so I'm going to explain some things to you. From now on, you are going to work here. You are going to serve the Pharaoh, she said, noticing Ian's stiff body. Anai was silent for a second, looking at the girl from the corner of her eye before continuing. There's nothing to be afraid of. No one is going to harm you here, unless you are being rude and disrespectful. I'm certain that you will not cause any problems now, so you can relax, Anai said, letting a silent, short chuckle escape her rosy lips. She looked back at the girl, but noticed that she still wasn't relaxed at all, which caused her to frown in worry and concern. But she didn't say anything else, as she led Ian through the spacious palace. Few hours have passed by now, and Ian spent the entire day with Anai, who explained everything to her. Ian got to know this palace more. She knew where some rooms were and what did she need to do. Apparently, Ian's main duty was to simply clean and keep things neat, as well as to be there when needed. She was told that the room she woke up in was hers, and she was told when and where she's going to have her meals. Comparing to her life so far, this was a luxury, but still, it was not even a tiny piece of what this palace offered. Of course, she wasn't surprised by this fact. How could she, a common slave, enjoy everything that this place had to give? Certainly, she couldn't, and she was aware of that. But no matter what, she was grateful and thankful that she was not taken by another abuser and alcohol addict. The young girl was currently in her own room, allowed to take some rest. She's going to start with her duties tomorrow, so Anai decided to just let the poor woman rest and use her free time before starting to work in this huge place, along with few other women her age. The sun was already setting, sending its last golden rays on the face of Earth as it slowly sank behind the hills. Ian was making her bed, trying to make it look flawless. She will need such skills in the future if she's going to work here, and so far she was doing great. But she was also tired from everything. The change was too sudden for her. She didn't know what to think. She was both happy and scared. She was happy because she may not have to feel any pain in a long time if she behaved properly, as Anai explained. But she was still scared of making mistakes. No matter how positive she tried to be, the young girl couldn't help herself but think that she may mess up sooner or later. What if I don't show up on time? What if I don't do something right? What if I get misunderstood? What if I make a big mistake? She couldn't help but question herself, praying that none of that will happen while she's here. As she continued arranging the small bed, decorating it with her few pillows, a small smile found its way into her face as she stepped back and felt no chains attached to her ankles. She took a moment to look down at her feet, her skin still blue, but she didn't mind. She looked down at her new robe. It was nothing special and unusual, but it still felt great to wear something that wasn't ripped, torn, and dirty. She wasn't hungry nor thirsty. She wasn't cold, and she was taken care of. But despite all of that, she still didn't feel free, and she wondered why. She frowned at the thought before letting a small sigh escape her lips as she shivered at memories of her dark past and thoughts about the possible bad fortune and future. She still felt insecure deep inside. Ian heard the door of her room open, and she glanced behind her over her shoulder, only to see a male in the royal clothing standing at the entrance. orbs widening, she quickly turned around before falling to the ground, bowing to the pharaoh. Her face was hidden, and she was thankful for that, since she was panicking. These were mistakes that she was so worried about, so she noted that she should pay more attention to her surroundings from now on. The silence filled the room as Ian tried her best to not even breathe loudly. The young pharaoh observed the woman bowing before him before his eyes traveled onto the nicely arranged mattress behind the girl. He raised his brow, his lips forming into a barely noticeable small smile, as if he just got an idea. But the smile faded away soon after. Ian was concerned by the silence which surrounded the two of them, but still she did nothing. What could she even do to begin with? She just had to be patient. The drop of sweat rolled down her face as an anxiety filled her being, her body stiffening as soon as she heard the young man's voice echo through the small, cozy room. I assume that Anai explained everything you need to know, Pharaoh commented, his violet orbs fixed onto the figure before him once again. Yes, Ian replied, hesitating at first, as words were stuck in her suddenly dry throat. I see, Pharaoh said, clearly noticing how nervous Ian was. He turned around, about to walk away, but he spoke up once again. There is one more thing, he started, his deep voice filled with more seriousness than it already was. Do not bow to me in such a disgraceful way. I'm not a controlling commoner such as the man you've had to obey so far, he simply said, before walking out of the room. Upon hearing the doors close, Ian got, slowly rising from the cold floor. She looked at the doors, letting out a heavy sigh leave her mouth as she closed her eyes, praying that she didn't mess anything up. However, the pharaoh's last sentence worried her. How was she supposed to bow in front of a pharaoh then? She was taught to bow down on the ground and keep quiet, obeying every order. So what did the pharaoh mean by that last sentence? What was she supposed to do? After thinking of many answers she was not satisfied with, she thought of an only logical solution. She is going to ask Anai about it tomorrow. Chapter 4. Bad Habits. Ah, Pharaoh said so? Anai muttered, her bright hazel orbs fixed onto the big royal-looking table in front of her, a smile never leaving her feminine features. Ian, however, looked away, concerned and even slightly embarrassed of her mistake. She never felt like this. Opening her mouth, the girl spoke, her voice quiet. Lady Anai? She hesitated, but then decided to finish her sentence. Do you, by any chance, know why did the pharaoh say that my way of bowing was disgraceful? Ian asked, watching as the woman cleaned the table in front of them. The younger girl was unable to come up with any answer that satisfied her, which only made her more confused than she already was. Anai thought for a while before replying to the female which stood beside her. Well, you used to bow to those men in such a way, right? You were taught to do so in order to appear obedient and in order to stay unharmed. I assume that the pharaoh didn't want you to see him as someone who might treat you the way they did, Anai explained as she cleaned the table with a rag. Ian nodded, finally understanding the meaning behind Pharaoh's words. She looked at the woman from the corner of her eye, opening her mouth to speak up once again. So, how should I bow then? She questioned, her voice suddenly echoing through the big dining hall, which looked as royal and rich as other rooms in the palace. Anai turned to face the young girl with a smile on her face before explaining. Just bend your back and look down at the feet of a person you are bowing to. It's not complicated, she said, and Ian immediately bowed to the woman just to make sure that she understood what she said. Blinking at the girl who was bowing in front of her, Anai chuckled, nodding. Yes, just like that, she commanded. Now rise, Ian, she added, her tone slightly more serious than it was before, as Ian did as she was told, avoiding an eye contact as always. Look up at me, she said, as if she was ordering her to do so. Ian hesitated for a few seconds before looking up at the slightly taller woman, her blue eyes meeting Anai's hazel ones. The kind smile found its way back to Anai's face. There you go. There is no need for you to avoid eye contact when you are with me. Just be careful around the priests and, of course, the pharaoh. Don't forget to have some respect, Anai explained. All right, Ian replied, nodding in agreement. Good. Now, I believe that it is time for you to start working as well, right? I told you where to go and what to do, so there shouldn't be any problems. But just in case there are some, feel free to find me and ask for help, Anai said. Oh, and I was informed that you're going to be the one to clean the pharaoh's chambers today as well, so go and do that first, she added, and Ian raised her eyebrow in concern, only to hear the woman chuckle at her reaction. Don't you worry, dear, you'll be fine, she said, and Ian nodded before walking away. Ian took a few rags and put them into the bucket before walking towards the pharaoh's chambers. She felt anxiety fill her being once again, since when was she supposed to clean that part of this palace? She was not informed about it until now, and the night seemed like she wasn't informed about it before either. She narrowed her eyes, frowning just slightly as she tried to calm down, hoping that both her nervousness and concern weren't as noticeable as she thought. She walked through many long hallways, which never failed to impress her with their appearance. Her grip around the metal bucket tightening as the sound of her rushed footsteps echoed through the seemingly endless rooms. She still didn't have much faith in herself. There was a silent voice whispering that she may make a mistake, which just added more fuel to the fire. She shook her head at the negative thoughts, glancing outside through the many windows, the sun warming up her skin and the floor under her feet. However, she could feel the warmth nor coldness of the ground no longer, as she was wearing simple sandals. Small yet heavy sigh escaped her soft lips as she looked back forward, closing her mouth and noticing that her lips were no longer as dry as they were before. She took a moment to think about herself as she walked. Her arms and legs were still covered in several bandages, hiding most of her cuts and bruises on her skin. She was no longer feeling thirsty or hungry, and her body was clean. She wasn't covered in the sand and dust anymore. She woke up on the rather comfortable mattress instead of waking up on the cold, dirty ground. She felt like she was an entirely different person, and she was grateful for that. In less than a week, she already felt the warmth touch her frozen, lifeless soul, and she couldn't deny it. It felt great. Upon approaching the doors of Pharaoh's chambers, she gulped, closing her eyes and breathing in and out in order to get rid of the nervousness which was lingering around her mind and body. She knocked a few times gently before reaching for the knob and opening the large door slowly. She peeked inside before taking a step into a big and nice-looking bedroom. She noticed that the room was empty too. No one was in it other than herself. She placed the shiny bucket onto the floor, looking around and taking a moment to observe her new surroundings. An eye showed her where the Pharaoh's room was, but she didn't show her inside of the room. And what did it look like? Ian watched every single detail in the room in awe, her blue orbs curiously traveling from an object to object. This room, indeed, was fit for someone of high social status, such as the Pharaoh. Deciding to stop admiring the perfection of this place, Ian approached the big bed, which sat in the middle of the room, and she started rearranging the soft silk blankets and pillows colored in the dark shade of purple. Right across the big entrance doors, there was a door that led out on the balcony. However, Ian didn't even think of allowing her curiosity to take her that far. So she continued with her work. She melted as her fingers touched the soft, cool material, and she continued to arrange the pillows on the mattress. Once she was pleased with her work, she took a step back, taking the rag from the bucket and starting to clean the small amounts of dust which were resting here and there. It was obvious that this room and everything in it was kept clean and fresh, so she didn't even have too much work to do. After cleaning the room, Ian wiped off the sweat on her forehead, letting out a sigh of relief. She didn't have much work to do, but the fact that this room was rather big didn't help her save some time. Despite that, however, the young woman managed to do everything right. She glanced around once again, her eyes searching for any stain that she may not have noticed by now, but fortunately, she found nothing. A small smile found its way onto her features as she turned around, facing the entrance doors. She knelt down to take the bucket filled with rags, but the door opened before she could even straighten up. She was about to bow down in the way she talked to, but she quickly corrected herself before she messed up again. Bending, she bowed in front of the man before her, looking down at the ground, noticing the long royal blue cape, which Pharaoh wore, touched the floor ever so slightly. The awkward silence filled the space between the two before a light chuckle broke it. The young Pharaoh couldn't help himself but laugh at the coincidence. The same thing happened in the girl's own room just yesterday, and now here. Ian, on the other hand, felt both relieved and confused upon hearing the young man laugh, and she bit her lip, hoping that he was pleased with her work at least slightly, and that she didn't manage to mess up. "So we meet again, huh?" the young man commented, looking down at the girl, his lips curled up into a grin as one of his hands rested on his hip. Ian said nothing, but she did feel relieved. She would let out a small sigh escape her mouth, but she didn't, and she paid attention to her actions. She didn't want to show any sign of disrespect. "You did a good job cleaning this place," Pharaoh said, looking around his own chambers. "Now follow me." he hummed, walking at the other side of the room, towards the door that led to the bay balcony. He stepped out, the golden warm sunshine caressing his skin as the hot, dry wind played with his three-colored locks. Ian turned around, walking after the mail, but not stepping outside onto the balcony. She hesitated, unsure if he wanted her to actually follow him out there as well. "Come here," he ordered, glancing at the girl over his shoulder, and she did as she was told. She stepped out, the sunlight hitting her skin, warming it up. She breathed in deeply, allowing the fresh air to fill her lungs as she approached the young male. He motioned her to come closer, and he pointed at the scenery before them. The girl raised her brow, her head lowered slightly as she slowly walked over to the railing, standing right beside the king. She glanced down, her orbs widening at the scene. It was the entire town, all in front of her. She could see everything, the streets, buildings, and crowds. She could even hear some of the noises and voices coming from the filled roads. She felt as if her heart skipped a beat, a small smile sneaking onto her face as her eyes shone in both awe and happiness. She never had the chance to see something like this in her entire life. The soft breeze gently touched her brown hair, which shone as the rays of sunshine hit it. The girl put her small hands under the fence, observing the beautiful scenery. She could even see the endless desert behind all of the civilization, and she admired the clear blue sky above the entire area. She felt as if she was lost in space and time. This was a completely new point of view for her. The deep and seemingly satisfied tone brought her back to reality, though. "Good. You are not completely broken, I see. You are still able to smile," the pharaoh commented, and Ian immediately pulled her hands away from the fence and bowed in front of the male respectfully, shutting her eyes. "I apologize, Pharaoh. She started, but was interrupted by the pharaoh's own voice, which didn't allow her to finish her sentence. "I'm not scolding you," he spoke. "You are too stiff. That's one of the bad habits you've developed through life," he commented, his eyes fixed onto the female in front of him. "You can go now. I'm certain you have more work to do." He dismissed her, and she just replied with a nod before leaving the young man alone with his thoughts and ideas. That's all for today, folks. But don't you guys worry. The next part will be coming to you very soon. If you guys enjoyed it, subscribe, hit like, and turn on the notification bell. I'll see you next time, my lovely viewers. Bye, everyone.